All right, folks. So we're ready to get into unit three, which is looking at budgeting. So remember, we're kind of tracking our use of money. Starting out unit one, we were just talking about setting goals, making good decisions, right? Looking to the future. Unit two, we just wrapped up, was talking about earnings and pay stubs and understanding how to receive money and get that money. Now, unit three, now that we've got the money, what do we do with it? All right. And so this is looking at how we budget our money. A budget is simply our plan for how we are going to use our money in the future. All right. So it's looking ahead and it gives us control over our conscious decisions to help alleviate overspending or alleviate going into debt, or if we're already in those situations, helping us get out of debt. All right. So when we're looking at budgeting, again, it's just our plan to manage your earned money. And it's a plan that you create before you earn it. So it's not like we earn this money and now what? Okay. The goal is to create this budget or create this plan prior to each paycheck. All right. Essentially, this creates a roadmap for your finances. All right. And so it helps guide you where you want to go, because without a budget, you end up oftentimes getting lost or taking the long way to your destination. All right. Your financial success is tied directly to how well you can manage your money. And so, creating a budget, creating a conscious spending plan is one of the best things that you can do to help you get to where you want to go. Now, money is constantly moving, right? It is active. We call it cash flow because it moves in and goes out. It's like water flowing through your account or flowing through your wallet. All right. It is constantly moving. And so you can either manage that flow or be controlled and managed by your money, right? We've seen lots of examples. We talked about, individuals in videos, whatever, where their money is controlling them, where they haven't had a plan. They have spent well more than they've earned, right? And they need to figure out how to get back on track. So it's never too late to start budgeting. It's never too late to create this plan. But obviously, the earlier you can develop that habit, the better. All right. Because it is empowering, giving you control. All right. Again, being conscious of your decision, being intentional and deliberate, okay, is empowering. It gives you the sense that you control your future instead of just being along for the ride. All right. Oftentimes, once you start to create a plan and you follow through with it, it almost feels like you get a raise because all of a sudden now you know where your money is going and you are doing it purposefully. All right. So, for example, let's say you have a part time job after school on the weekends, whatever, and let's say that you earn about $500 a month, right? Without a budget, come the end of the month, your money has kind of just disappeared, right? It's gone to snacks, gone to clothes, entertainment, whatever. At the end of the month, though, oftentimes you'll look back and say, where the hell did my money go, right? And you're kind of left wondering what happened. Like, man, I had all this money and now I don't, right? But with a budget, with a plan, you can assign specific dollar amounts to those categories. So now you know already where your money will go. All right. So you might put designated money into savings. You might put some money toward your needs and then put a specific amount toward your entertainment, toward having fun. All right. Ultimately, having a plan and sticking to that plan, being conscious and deliberate, helps to protect yourself from financial crisis, right? Whether that is coming up with unexpected costs, unexpected expenses, a car breakdown that needs repair, an appliance that is no longer working, right? Whatever the case is. Or maybe it's just finding something, seeing something that you would really like to have, but you don't have the money for it because you've already spent. All right. Budgeting helps to act as a protective measure against these types of challenges. Okay. Again, being conscious, being deliberate, being intentional with where your money goes, helps to prevent you from that unconscious overspending, and helps to create that safety net that when you do start to overspend, you're able to catch yourself relatively quickly and get back on track. All right. So as I said, having a plan removes that management by crisis. Instead of just moving from crisis to crisis to crisis, right? Living paycheck to paycheck to paycheck, you put yourself in control. It does not matter how much or how little you earn. All right. You can always benefit from a plan. So, what does this look like? How do we get there? All right. So, budgeting, you're simply telling your money where it's going to go instead of wondering at the end of the month where your money went. So, we're going to talk types of budgets. We're going to talk kind of some ways to kind of execute these budgets. All right. There's not just one, it's not a one size fits all. All right. You can take the advantages or you can take elements or ideas from various types of budgets and put them together to create a system that works for you. But we're going to talk about three types of budgets here. All right. The first one is your 50, 30, 20. The second one is an envelope system. Third one is called a zero based budget. All right. So for the first one, the 50, 30, 20 rule is very straightforward. It's effective, right? It categorizes your spending into three topics, either needs, wants, or savings. All right. Now, the 50, 30, 20 isn't a hard and fast rule. It just creates kind of a guideline. It gives a structure to gauge how you're spending your money. All right. So with the 50, 30, 20, 50% of your income will go toward your needs. 30% will go toward your wants, and 20% will go towards savings. And again, anytime we're talking about this, we're talking about our net income, right? So after taxes and other deductions have been taken out of our paycheck, this is the money that we actually can spend. All right. With regard to needs, okay, these are your non negotiables. These are your essential items for living a basic, comfortable life. Okay. So housing, shelter, right? Food, gas to get to school, to get to a job. Maybe it's medicine. All right. So these are things that you have to have. And again, the emphasis is on basic. Okay. We're not talking extravagant. We're not talking about, oh, I need to eat out 5 nights a week. Right. And I need the most luxurious car. Okay. We're talking about just taking care of the basics. All right. Wants are, and we've talked about this before, wants are not necessary. Okay. They're not essential, but they're really fun to have. They add enjoyment to your life, they add quality to your life. Right. So maybe that's tickets out to an event, to a concert, to a game, eating out with a partner, with friends. Okay. Traveling, vacationing. These are all wants. All right. And then finally, savings. Okay. The goal first with your savings is to create an emergency fund. Emergency fund ideally is built up to have somewhere between 3 and 6 months of living expenses. Now, if you're single, if you're on your own, right, you want to have a little bit, you want to be to the higher end of that. That way, if you get injured, if you get hurt, if you lose your job, you're not immediately in crisis mode. You've got some savings to fall back on, right? If you're in a family, if you're in a partnership, a marriage, and both individuals are working, if one person is unable to work, the other is going to have to carry the load a little bit, but your income isn't going to fall straight to zero as a family unit. So you can afford to be a little bit more on the shorter end of this, right? On 3 or 4 months. Okay, but again, this is there as a safety net in case something unexpected, in case something tragic occurs in which you can no longer work for a period of time. You can also dip into this when you have unexpected expenses come up, like that car repair, like replacing an appliance, like when your roof leaks, whatever the case is. All right. Once you've got that emergency fund, then your savings can turn over and it can kick into investing for long term, taking care of yourself for when you retire and you're no longer working, right? Being able to maintain your standard of living. Maybe it's used for paying down your debt. Or maybe it's used for some other specific goal, like saving up for a down payment on a house, saving up for college, whatever the case is. All right. So that's the 50, 30, 20, breaking it down into three basic categories and gives a guideline for how much money should be going into each of those categories. So let's say that your net income for the month is $2,500. Okay. So for the 50% for our needs, 50% of that would be 1,250. For our wants, we would look at 30%. 30% of 2,500 or zero point 0.3 is 750. And then for savings, we would look at 20% or 0.2 of that 2,500. That would be $500. Okay, so it gives us a basic guideline, a basic structure for how much money should go toward each category. And then we can make decisions more specifically about how we designate the money within each category. All right, so that's one way of approaching your budget. The next one is the envelope system. All right, with the envelope system, you emphasize using cash for all in-person transactions. Okay, this is really helpful because it provides a tangible, visible, hands-on approach to your money. As the name implies, you'll take actual physical envelopes. Okay, you'll label each envelope for specific categories or specific spending requirements. And then you take out cash from your paycheck, from your account, and you put that money into each category, into each envelope. Now, there's some, even on this system, you're not going to take all of your money out. You're not going to empty out your account every month. There are some payments that are fixed, that stay the same, that can be automated, right? Your mortgage or your apartment rent. Those, you can automate that so it's deducted automatically. Maybe your car payment or a student loan repayment. Those, keep the money in your account and just have those automatically paid, automatically deducted. But when it comes to the more discretionary accounts or categories, right? Like how much you would spend on food, on clothing, on gas for your car, and so on. Take out cash and use that cash in the envelope for those purchases. All right. Why is this useful, or how is this effective? Number one, again, it provides a visual representation. So you can visually see how much money is going into each category. You can also visibly see as each envelope gets used and the money gets paid down some, right? Let you be aware, I better start being more mindful of where I'm spending for that particular category, right? It also helps to enforce discipline in your spending because you're limited to only the cash in that envelope. So it becomes really hard to overspend if you're relying on cash, because with cash, you can only spend what's in your pocket or what's in the envelope. All right. So as I said, to start this system, okay, you're going to identify your variable spending categories, not the amount, not the categories that are fixed, because you don't need to worry about over or underspending in those categories because it's the set amount. All right. So we're only looking at our variable categories, like eating out, like groceries, like entertainment, clothing, transportation, etc. All right. Then you're going to take your envelopes and you're going to label them for the specific categories. So here I've got an envelope for groceries, for entertainment, for gas, for clothing, eating out, and so on. All right. Then I take a predetermined amount of cash, however much I consciously and deliberately intend for each category, and I put the money into those envelopes. Right now, when I need to make a purchase in one of those categories, I refer back to the envelope and I take money out of that envelope to make the purchase. Okay. This can be really helpful with people who are impulsive in their spending, who are prone to overspending in certain areas. All right. Because you're imposing a limit to prevent that overspending, to prevent that impulsive purchase, because you're only spending what you physically have in the envelope. Now, to maintain that envelope system, number one, set realistic amounts. All right. So it has to be something that's maintainable and actually doable. If you put $20 into the gas envelope, right, and you typically fill up maybe once a week or once every other week, and a typical fill up is maybe $40 or $50, putting $20 in that envelope isn't going to work, clearly, right? So be realistic with yourself about what the amounts you need. Okay, so be honest with yourself and make sure the amounts that you're putting into the envelopes are realistic and appropriate. Okay, number two, review regularly. Okay, periodically review and adjust your envelope amounts if necessary. Not necessarily in the middle of the month, but after you've done this a few months, you can start to get a sense of, every month I start to get really tight on that food envelope. And some months I'm not using at all my clothing envelope, right? So you can start to adjust to reflect how you actually tend to spend your money. And then number three, and this one's important, no borrowing from other envelopes. Once an envelope is empty, resist the urge to take money out of another envelope and move it toward that envelope. All right, because then what you're doing is you're starting to overspend in certain categories, and it's going to hurt you when you don't have the money in the other envelopes for those purchases. All right, but that's the envelope system. The last type of budget that we'll look at is called a zero-based budget. All right. Again, the key here is to be intentional with your plan. With the zero-based budget, you're giving every dollar that you earn a specific label, a specific job, and you're doing it to every single dollar that you earn so that no money is left unassigned. Okay. So this is really being very intentional and conscious of how you're using your money. With a zero-based budget, the goal, as the name suggests, is to get to zero. So the money coming in minus your expenses should get you to exactly zero. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you're spending every dollar that you earn, and it doesn't mean that your bank account is going to zero out every month. It means your budget should get to zero. Okay, so you're not spending every dollar, but you are allocating every dollar to specific categories. Some of those categories are going to be saving, right? Some of those categories may be for future goals. That's not money that you're necessarily spending, but you can consider savings as an expense to help bring your budget into balance and get you to zero. Now, when it comes to how to track or how to manage that zero-based budget, number one, track all your spending over multiple months to get a sense of your monetary habits and get a sense of how much you're spending in certain categories. Okay, we talked all the way back in Unit 1 about developing successful monetary habits. One of those was keeping a spending log or tracking your spending. Again, that's different than a budget because tracking your spending looks backwards, whereas a budget looks forward or a spending plan looks forward. But you can use your history as a guideline, at least to create budgets early on to give you an idea of, hey, historically, this is how much I've spent on groceries. Historically, this is how much I've spent on gas each month. All right. So use your history as a guideline for creating those first initial budgets. All right. After you've done that, you calculate your monthly income and then you estimate your spending for each category. Okay, so you determine this is how much money I'm going to give to this category. This is how much money I'm going to give to that category, and so on. So again, this is empowering because now you're deciding where your money is going instead of looking back and thinking, where did it all go? All right, now, after you estimate how much you need for each category, subtract that spending or subtract your expenses from your net income. And again, we're going to include savings as an expense in this case to make sure that we don't spend it otherwise. All right, so you subtract those spending categories from your net income, and you want to then make adjustments to get to zero. And we'll talk about those adjustments here in a moment. Once you're at zero, you've got your plan. All right, then you need to monitor your spending throughout the month and change and possibly adjust as needed. All right. Under this system, this is a much more fluid system It's a dynamic system. So if you realize that you need to spend more in certain categories, right? If your spending is going to go up in one category, you can decrease your spending in another category that you haven't spent yet to maintain that zero. All right. And so whether it's you realize that you're going to need to adjust or whether you're still in the planning stages, right, of creating that budget, if you're not at zero, all right, you do need to make adjustments. So if you're spending more than you make, obviously that's not sustainable. You need to cut, you need to find where some unnecessary purchases are being made or unnecessary expenses, areas that you can cut back and reduce the amount that you're allocating to that purpose, right? If your income is more than your expenses, that's not a bad problem to have. Now you can identify other financial priorities to put money toward, right? Maybe it's splurging on yourself and letting and saying, you know what, I'm going to eat out a little bit more often this next month, or I'm going to buy that, I'm going to add more into my clothing amount this month, and I'm going to get that dress, that suit, those shoes, whatever that I really want, right? Maybe though you're happy with the allocation as it is, so you can identify other priorities that the extra money can go to. So that surplus of money can be used to pay down debts faster, saving you on the cost of interest over time. Okay. You can put more money into savings to help build up that emergency savings fund quicker. Okay. Or maybe you start putting a little bit more money towards some other major purchase or some other financial goal. Okay. The thing to remember though is that the budget, it's not a judgment on you or your interests, your hobbies, your activities. Okay. It's simply a plan. The nice thing about this, though, is that it can remove a lot of the guilt from your spending. Let's say that you have a habit of spending a lot of money on video games or on whatever, on clothing, on shoes, on uh, power tools, right? Whatever your hobby is, whatever that thing is that really kind of where you let loose, right? Sometimes you start to feel guilty, like, oh man, I really shouldn't buy this, but I really want this, and you make that purchase, and then you feel guilty about it. If you're in a relationship, if you're sharing financial responsibilities, right? What happens? You start to hide purchases from your partner, from your spouse. Okay, it starts to build distrust. Okay. With this budget, though, you've already said this is how much money I'm going to spend toward that category. Now, when you spend that money, you can do so guilt free because you already worked it into the plan. All right. Now, again, what if you realize that you're going to be overspending or underspending in certain categories? This budget is dynamic and fluid and can be changed. So you can adjust at any time during the month. You overspend in one category, find other places where you can cut back momentarily, reduce that amount that you're allocating to that category, and get yourself back to zero. Now, regardless of how you allocate that money, all right, the very first category where you should put money towards is saving. No matter what system you're using, no matter what your ultimate financial goals are, no matter how much you're allocating to the other areas, your first category should always be saving. This is known as PYF, pay yourself first. Treat this as a non-negotiable, money that you have to put aside for yourself. Whether that, again, is creating that safety net to provide yourself peace of mind, whether it's paying down debt to save money in the long run, whatever the case is, okay, put money into savings first. Now, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, government entity that measures all sorts of consumer and economic activity, okay, the average U.S. household spent a little over $60,000 last year. Divided by 12 months, that's slightly more than $5,000 each month. However, the median savings account balance in the U.S. is under $5,000, $4,800. All right. So the average household in the US does not have enough money in savings to cover even 1 month of expenses. That means if somebody gets laid off, loses their job, gets injured, gets sick, can't work, they've got 1 month to get back on their feet or it's crisis time. To constantly be living with that pressure in the back of your mind, floating around in that subconscious, is an extremely stressful place to reside. All right, because you're always on the brink of financial disaster. So as we said, the goal is to create an emergency fund somewhere between 3 and 6 months of living expenses. Once you've established that, start pivoting and looking at long-term goals. All right. So 3 different plans. Each of them have their own advantages, okay, their own strengths. With 50/30 budget, okay, it gives us that broad general framework for giving us an idea, how much money should I put toward my needs or my wants? This can answer that question. Doesn't tell us specifically how much to put toward transportation or housing or whatever, but it does give us a broad framework. All right. The envelope system provides a more hands on approach for that discretionary spending, helping us to control the urge to overspend or to splurge in certain categories. Right. That that hands-on approach is also a visual approach, so I can see in real time as the money is going down in certain envelopes. I need to be really careful with how I'm spending in that category. All right. And then finally, the zero-based budget, right, is by far the most detailed, but it's also the most intentional. And it's in which you are most conscious of the spending decisions that you're making. Now, in reality, okay, most individuals and most families that are able to successfully utilize a budget tend to use elements of all of this. Okay. There's no right or wrong way to budget as long as the budget works for you. All right. So synergize the strengths. Take the things that work from each of these approaches and put them together to create a system, to create a structure that works for you and provides you with the flexibility that you need. All right. But being able to budget and being able to stick to a budget is one of the best ways to guarantee yourself success with money, regardless of how much you've earned. That's budgeting in a nutshell. There'll be 2 activities, 2 worksheets to complete for this today. We'll come back with more later on. But the 2 immediate worksheets that need to get done is this 3.1 Vanessa's budget and 3.1 what does the average American household spend money on. The first one, Vanessa's budget. Okay, there are instructions on this that kind of walk through what you need to do, but I'll also talk you through this really quick. All right, this first page outlines Vanessa's plan for how she would like to use her money for a given month, and then also where the money actually went. All right, so she's working to kind of take control of her financial future. She wants to start budgeting, so she sets out at the beginning of the month and she lists out how much money she plans or how much she intends to spend in each category. Then at the end of the month, she looks back and she's tracked her earnings and her spending and she records where the money went. All right. So what you'll need to do is on the second page, you can see this kind of basic budget worksheet in which there are the categories on the left and then the budgeted amount, actual spending amount, and then different. So this top half, her planned income and expenses, her plan will go in the budget column. The bottom half of the page, how her month actually went, that'll go in the actual column. And then any difference, any discrepancy between those two will be put in this third column here, right? And it tells us you're going to take your actual amount minus your budgeted amount. So, for example, if we were planning, maybe she planned to spend $150 on food, but she actually spent 180. If that were the case, right? Her actual 180 minus her intention 150 means she spent $30 more than she intended. Maybe she planned on spending $110 on gas this month, but ended up only spending 85. All right. Then she underspent compared to her plan. So that's gonna be a negative. Okay. So it's not negative in the terms of bad, but we're taking our actual minus our plan. So she was 25 under budget, right? And so because we would say she's under budget, that would be a negative. She's below where she planned to be. All right. And so it's important to keep your positive and negatives in this difference column accurate so that I go through some may be over budget, some may be under budget, but you need to reflect that in some being positive, some being negative. Otherwise, if I just said, well, the difference is 25, without looking more in depth, I might think that I'm $55 off my balance, off my budget, right? But really altogether, I'm $5 off. Okay. So um, that's how you'll fill out that second sheet. And then the third page, okay, has 8 questions just about the numbers that you fill in here, right? So you'll kind of step back and analyze that budget and see what you did right, maybe what you did wrong, and so on. All right, so that's the first worksheet. The second worksheet is this: how much does the average American household spend? Relatively short and quick worksheet. All right, that again refers back to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which I mentioned in that presentation. Okay, it's a government organization that tracks all sorts of labor activities, business hirings, and job openings, as well as consumer actions. All right, there's a linked article here that'll take you directly to that BLS.gov news release. All right, and admittedly, this is a little bit dry. It's not, it's not written in a way that's supposed to be super captivating. It's just an end of the year report on spending. But it is kind of interesting to see where the average household is putting its money toward and trends in terms of what categories are in how families are increasing their spending on, what categories are they cutting back on their spending, and so on. So read through that report. Okay, don't go super in depth about it. Just give it a easy read, right? And then there are 5 questions to answer based on that. All right, and I included a little graphic up there that gives a quick little snapshot in general about where the money is going for the average household. Okay, so those are the 2 worksheets, and that's all we need to get done for today. So I'm going to turn you loose, use the time wisely, and get that done.